Personally, I'm delighted to attend this workshop on student mobility and knowledge-based economies, opportunities and challenges for India and EU, being held here in very close association with the Jawaharlal Nehru University and the EU delegation to India. I value this opportunity to interact with distinguished guests and governments of European Union member states, the world of academia, and most importantly, civil society organizations. It's not for me to give a very long inaugural address. I shall curtail my comments to a few issues. The background has already been set by Professor Khadria, and Basant Potnoru has also given you some background about the Indo-EU project and the various activities that have taken place under the aegis of this project. But let me just give a few remarks on the relations of India and European Union, the Indo-EU project, and the various activities we are considering to do under this project, as well as the next project which we hope to do very soon. The relationships between India and Europe is one of the oldest international relations in the world. There are obvious reasons: India's colonial ties with the European countries, of which all of us are aware of. And we also know about trade relations with India and Europe and the movement of merchants, traders and businessmen in the pre-colonial days, stretching back to thousands of years. There has been significant movement and exchange of goods, people and cultures between the regions during these periods, based upon economic and political relations. In the post-independence era, the movement of highly skilled professionals from India started to Britain and to the rest of Europe and other developed countries. During the late 1960s, 70s and 80s, the large share of international migration flows from India was occupied by the United States, Canada and other developed nations outside Europe. International migration to Europe, barring the UK, which had not ceased completely but had reached a minimum during this period. But in the 1990s, these flows have visibly increased to significant levels owing to the renewed ties between India and Europe. I am extremely pleased to recall that in the Joint Action Plan for the India-EU 2005, both the strategic partners have recognized the importance of the exchange of scholars and students in the enhancement of mutual knowledge. As multilingual, multicultural, natural partners, we have acknowledged the crucial contribution of education and training to the development of knowledge-based economies and the key role that they play in boosting growth and employment. As strategic allies, we laid emphasis on the significance of setting up sectoral policy dialogues that would aim to cover faculty and student mobility and mechanisms to promote it. However, given these commonalities and despite the presence of excellent programs implemented to achieve it, I believe that we could have done much more than we have done already. The scope for expanding cooperation between the two regions in the field of mobility and migration remains enormous, mainly owing to demographic reasons, the need for skills on one hand, and the surplus of skills and people on the other. Several measures that would enable regular exchanges of best practices in the field of education, information sharing, and knowledge building by encouraging relevant stakeholders to move across borders and participate are awaiting necessary actions from policymakers on both sides. Ladies and gentlemen, the India-EU project partnership has always been extremely important, but it needs to be infused with even greater cooperation considering the demographic situation on both sides. I understand that in the wake of the contemporary scenario of increasing internationalization of higher education at all levels, national, institutional and individual, the discourse on student mobility has also assumed greater importance. The subject is significant due to the fast emerging global knowledge economies as drivers of development. People endowed with knowledge drive research and development, leading to conversion of knowledge into scientific and technological products. They make ideas, goods and services transcend national boundaries. Hence, academic mobility is an integral part of the global knowledge economy. It is also known that more than half of the foreign students enrolled abroad are from Asian countries, with India accounting for 5% of the total foreign student population, a very large chunk indeed. Significant destination countries for Indian students, as highlighted in the OECD report in 2008, are the US, Australia, United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, and Russia, followed by two important EU member states, that is Germany with 3,644 students and France with 1,038 students. Hence, there is a significant potential for EU member states to carve a niche for themselves in the education sector in India by proposing significant scholarship initiatives and educational schemes. In other words, there's greater scope for Indian students to go across to many EU countries for purposes of higher studies. Moreover, augmenting economic cooperation between India and Europe is also expected to drive more mobility of talent, including students. Therefore, student mobility not only would constitute one of the main priorities within the strategic cooperation, but might also see increasing strides of the stocks and flows of mobile students between the regions in the future. I thank all of you, guests, EU ambassadors, representatives of the EU delegation, member states, representatives of the Government of India and state governments, teachers, researchers, and students for being here.
I'm very pleased to be here with you today at this consultation workshop on student mobility and knowledge-based economy, opportunities and challenge for India and the EU, which is being organized by the India Center for Migration as part of the EU-funded project developing a knowledge base for policymaking on EU-India migration. You have heard from previous speakers the objectives of this workshop and about this EU-funded project. So there is no need for me to dwell on that, but I would rather talk about the considerable importance that student mobility has gained as a major policy area in Europe over the last decade. Globalization, the need to internationalize curricula, and promotion of international mobility have come to be regarded as important elements of higher education policy. This applies to individual higher education institutions and to national governments in Europe, but even more so it is true for the European Union. Policy development in this area first received a boost through the launch of the Erasmus program in 1987, the original aim of which was to enable a minimum of 10% of all higher education students in Europe to study for a period of time in another European country. Since then, there have been a number of other policy developments, such as the Sorbonne Declaration of 1998 and the Bologna Declaration of 1999, which demanded an increase in European mobility as a chief priority. More recently, the European Union's Education and Training 2010, a policy framework which is the educational manifestation of the Lisbon process, names mobility and European cooperation as one of its concrete objectives for European education. In parallel to these collective European efforts, many national governments have started campaigns which market their country's higher education institutions worldwide to attract as many students as possible from other countries or to attract the best one. There is no doubt that education services as a sector is highly profitable, which the EU would promote further in the coming decades, including reaching out to India, which has a remarkable rise in the past 10 years in the numbers of students pursuing higher education outside India. There also seems to be a broad consensus, at least amongst labor markets experts, that high-skilled migration is desirable for Europe. And international student mobility is an important channel through which high-skilled immigrants arrive, and it's particularly attractive in view of the high integration potential of high-skilled students. In general, stakeholders in higher education consider student mobility as an instrument for individual development useful to the economy and to the society, contributing to personal development and enhanced competence and intercultural understanding, and consequently improving employability in an increasingly international labor market. The program aims at enhancing quality in higher education through scholarships and academic cooperation between Europe and the rest of the world, with a budget of 950 million euros, or it might be more telling to you, approximately 6,600 crore rupees for the period 2009-2013. It more specially provides support to, first, higher education institutions that wish to implement joint programs at postgraduate level, or to set up interinstitutional cooperation partnership between universities from Europe and targeted third countries, including India. 11 Indian institutions have been involved in 8 master and 5 doctorate programs, with Jawaharlal Nehru University and Chennai Mathematical Institute being involved in 2 each. India was the top-scoring country with 14 fellowships among the 130 candidates awarded doctoral fellowship in the first selection year, that was in 2010, and in 2012 was covered by 4 India partnerships, EU-India partnerships, and 8 EU-Asia regional partnerships, with the partnership led by institutions in 9 different EU member states. India has consistently been amongst the best performing countries under the Erasmus Mundus program. As the program is coming to an end in 2013, only some of the activities are going to be available this year. This will concern scholarships for course starting in the academic year 2014-15. Application should be made during the last quarter 2013 or January 2014. And importantly, new partnership will be added in 2013. So watch out for the news. The consortium website will give details nearer to the time. But the EU has also a special website called Study in Europe, which gives potential applicants up-to-date information on study opportunities, scholarship, and living in the 32 countries concerned. There will also be some new elements as knowledge alliance between higher education institutions and business to promote creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship by offering new learning opportunities and qualification. There will be also sector skill alliance, partnership between education and training providers and business to promote employability by forming new sector-specific curricula and innovative forms of vocational training and teaching. In addition to Erasmus Mundus, I want to highlight the Marie Sklodowska-Curie Action, MSCA, in the Horizon 2020 EU research program, which will also fund international fellowship as well as the international exchange of research and innovation staff. Overall, the MSCA will contribute to support the human resources behind research and innovation by providing international and intersectoral mobility plus attractive working conditions. The MSCA will place particular emphasis on combining research with other skills that maximize employability. The MSCA are expected to become the main EU program offering support for excellent doctoral training, supporting 25,000 PhDs. We hope that the first calls for proposal will be announced by the end of this year. Apart from promoting positive bilateral relations between 2 economic powers, promoting student mobility is also considered mutually beneficial in terms of the huge economic incentive it provides. The India-EU Study Center program, which was implemented from 2005 to 2011 with a total budget of 4 million euros or about 28 crore rupees, was an integral part of the EU Joint Action Plan adopted in 2005. Also, as already mentioned, India has been one of our star performers into the Erasmus Mundus program, and we welcome the excellent cooperation and responsiveness of Indian institutions to the different aspects of the program. There is, however, an enhanced need for comprehensive, up-to-date and reliable information on the phenomenon of student mobility and its effect and the challenges and obstacles that confront it. This is especially important as we move forward towards our new generation programs where we hope to see very considerable Indian participation and exchange in both directions. The EU is confident that we will continue to work together for the mutual benefit of both India and European people. That in this workshop will provide us an opportunity to reflect on various aspects of student mobility and come up with recommendations that promote better policies and programs aimed at enhancing EU-India cooperation, including on student mobility. I wish the participants all the best in their deliberation and thank once again the India Center for Migration and the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs for having organized this workshop. Thank you very much.
I worked in the Foreign Ministry in the area of justice and home affairs, an area that covers, in other words, migration, legal and illegal, and visas. I thought it might be a good opportunity to exchange some ideas with you, to tell you my experience, both from my time in Athens working as a representative of the member states in Brussels, trying to make the European legislation more friendly to third country nationals, and working at an EU embassy here, despite the fact that I don't have responsibility for visas, how we can make this service friendlier to the Indian students and researchers that they want to go to Europe, to the European countries, to continue or enhance or advance their studies and knowledge. So based on that, I try to put down some words that I want to share with you. The environment we are in, the globalization, the demographic change, and the transformation of the society are affecting the European Union, the member states, and all countries around the world. According to the United Nations, the assessments we have, there is about 1 billion migrants, international migrants and internal migrants. There is 44 million forcibly displaced people. And there is about 50 million people living and working abroad on an irregular status. Against this environment, the European Union is facing important structural challenges of both demographic and economic nature. I don't think it's necessary for me to go into details for that. The media, the local media, have reported extensively of what's happening in Europe, the effect and the impact on the whole world and on India. Immigration of highly skilled people, students and researchers in particular, are groups which are increasingly sought after all over the world. And third country national students and researchers, we think, can contribute to a pool of well-qualified human capital that we can use to cope with the challenges of the new socio-economic environment. What is the European Union is doing here? We have adopted the global approach to migration and mobility, which sets the framework of our external migration policy. And it defines how the European Union organizes its dialogue and cooperation with non-EU countries in the area of migration and mobility. One of the objectives of the EU action in education is to promote Europe and the member states, of course, as a world center of excellence for studies and vocational training. And we are very proud to say that despite the fact that for Indian students, Europe it's not probably the prime destination. I saw in your report the facts that you have from the United Nations. According to our statistics, the Eurostat, there is about 500,000 third country national students in Europe. It's 500,000 people that they have residence permit for studies and research in Europe, which I think it's an expression of how interesting and how attractive Europe is, and something that we'll have to explore in India as well. Migration, in this case, clearly constitutes a form of mutual enrichment for the migrants concerned, the country of origin, and of course the host EU states that help to promote familiarity with other cultures. The legal framework we have built the last few years, since 2004, is based on two directives. The Directive 114 of 2004 on students, which sets mandatory rules for the admission of third country nationals, with an option of EU member states to apply the directive for school pupils, volunteers, and trainees. And the second piece of legislation is the Directive 71 of 2004 on researchers, which provides for a fast-track procedure for the admission of non-EU national researchers who have signed a hosting agreement with a research organization approved by a member state. The aim of the EU legislation is that it can give the opportunity to third country nationals to move within Europe on a temporary basis, and at the same time to reduce obstacles and determine the rules concerning the conditions and the procedures for admitting them for a period exceeding 3 months, and in the case of researchers, grant them additionally intra-EU mobility rights. More particularly, what we realize is that there is absence of time limits for assessing applications. There is divergent frameworks for issuing visas and residence permits. Sometimes residence permits issued are for shorter period than the duration of the research program, and students admitted have limited possibilities to fund their stay in Europe through work. Researchers as well and their family members, they're not guaranteed access to the labor market. And moving from one member state to another was very difficult or sometimes impossible. The aim is to better optimize the benefits and properly deal with the risks, and taking into account the similarities of the challenges faced by the different categories of migrants. And the proposal that it's under consideration, and it will of course take some time, and it will be modified according to the proposals, to the ideas of the member states, provides for a 6-day period limit for member states authorities to decide on an application for a visa or a residence permit, and it will make the application process more straightforward and transparent. It will make possible EU mobility. It will introduce simpler and more flexible rules when it comes for students and researchers to enroll in joint programs, and family members accompany students and researchers will be granted mobility rights. Furthermore, students will be allowed to work for a minimum of 20 hours per week so they can support themselves, and researchers and students will be able to remain for a period of at least 12 months after they complete the studies. Of course, all this will have to take into account ideas like good governance of migration and mobility, because well-functioning border controls, lower levels of illegal migration, and an effective return policy will offer more opportunities for legal migration and mobility. We agree that in Europe, our legislation has problems, and we're ready to face that and produce a new piece of legislation that will make Europe more attractive for students and researchers. It's my request to the Ministry of the Interior, to the government of India, that you will have to look into your legislation as well. Like we're trying to make it friendlier to students, you will have to try to make it friendlier to European students. This will help our two people, European and Indian people, to come closer to each other, to understand each other. And by concluding, let me thank once again the ICM, the European delegation here, and of course our host, the university, of giving us the opportunity of being here today. Thank you very much.